All right, welcome to today's webinar. We are doing the WA investor market update. So if you are listening to this live and you've got any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A for me. And with me, I have Deb Gidman from Resident Property. So Deb, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, you focus mainly on the south of Perth at the moment. So what areas would you be referring to today when we're chatting?
Well, predominantly Baldivis, but all the way sort of down to Mandurah and Coburn, that real sort of southern corridor.
Okay, amazing. Now, we have had the big investor influx about sort of maybe 4 years ago now, 3, 4 years ago now. And what have you seen happen? It's probably been about 6 months since we've had a catch up with you. What have you seen changed in, say, the last 6 months? Like, if someone said to you, what's the investor activity doing at the moment in Perth? How would you respond?
Well, we still have a lot of those investors that made the decision maybe 2 years ago to build, especially in Baldivis, and those properties are all coming to market now. But the problems that we kind of are experiencing is that the rentals that the rent amount that they were probably told 2 years ago has maybe changed.
Changed up
And
or changed down?
Well, it's probably a little bit down on what they were told
Yeah.
because I think they were predicting because the rents were increasing so much. They were saying, oh, you could get 750. And we have such a large amount of stock in this area that we're not getting those high rents anymore. The larger properties, the established properties on the bigger blocks, the larger ones are still doing quite well with regards to rents. But the standard 4x2s on the 350 square meter blocks, they're starting to sort of dip a little bit in rent.
And is it because there's a lot of stock available, so therefore it's just a bit more competition because they're
Yeah.
all brand new 4x2s?
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
all the same. There's no sort of unique. They've all got 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a laundry. They're all the same, and they're all coming to market now. So we generally look around 650 for a 4x2 in my area. However, some investors are getting a bit smart and putting in at 630 in order to get the interest. Because if you've got 100 properties and a tenant is scrolling through and they're all the same, which ones are they going to look at? The rent is going to be the factor. So,
Yeah.
in order to get the people through, those smarter investors are going a little bit lower.
When it comes to home opens for, well, actually, you do some selling. So, how are the home opens for the selling properties? Actually, we get this added bonus to ask you because we don't normally get to ask people that sell. What are those looking like? Are you getting big numbers coming through your sales home opens?
So it was going crazy towards the end of last year, and obviously this year things have. I think I listen to a lot of the investor, Facebook groups and so forth, and a lot of people are sort of saying Perth is finished. They've moved on from Perth and sort of going South Australia or regional Queensland, and it's like almost like a plague of locusts. So those eastern state investors that were here massively last year, they have kind of dropped off. It's more investors that have purchased a while ago, and maybe those properties are coming to fruition now, but there's not as much competition in those home opens. It's more local people that are looking to buy.
First home buyers, would you say?
A lot of first home buyers in my area, yeah,
Yeah.
or there are some areas with bigger properties, so maybe that second home as well.
Yeah, okay. Then, if we have a look at the rental home opens, what are we experiencing with those? Like, are properties leasing within one home open, three home opens? Are they big? Are they small? What's happening there?
Yeah. It was really interesting. I had a property come up in Waikiki, which was a bigger family home. Actually, I had two side by side. I have a 3x2, sorry, and next door to it is a 4x2, but with multiple activity areas. And I struggled with the 3x2, and I had
Mhm.
to drop and drop, and I probably did 4 or 5 home opens. And then the one next door, I was inundated with interest, and at least at the first home open for a really good rent. 730 for that particular property in Waikiki. I was trying to figure out what it was. I always think that the lower value properties would go quicker, but I think it's the number of bedrooms. three,
Yeah.
three bedrooms, and they were small bedrooms as well. You know, those bigger blocks with the smaller homes, the older style properties. But we eventually ended up leasing that one for 570, and then the 4x2 for 730. That's like a massive difference for an extra bedroom
Mm.
and some additional space. But it was very, very popular. Multi-generational families. There was a lot of South Africans, a lot of families from New Zealand. So we do have a lot of people still coming in from South Africa, from the UK, from New Zealand, and they like to come to those suburbs that are sort of 45 minutes south or north of the city. So we've still got a lot of people coming in, but the bigger ones, I've leased a few bigger style properties and they seem to be really popular.
It's interesting because I haven't in the past really focused hugely on bedroom size. Like it's been a factor, but not incredible. But the last couple of recent home opens that I've done, I've had both of the families give me feedback about the rooms because their adult children are
You
living up
know,
longer and they need the bigger rooms.
I wrote it down on here to actually raise. That is the feedback that I'm getting. You
Yeah.
know, we're building these homes and trying to maximize the use of the space by putting in four bedrooms, but the bedrooms can maybe take a double bed, not a queen. And there's not much space in them. And they're saying, I've got adult children. And those adult children want to spend time in the bedrooms. So
Yeah.
that's a big factor for people. So these older ones that are bigger on the sort of 700 square meter blocks that are bigger homes with bigger bedrooms, they are super popular.
Yeah, so the tip that I gave one of these people, these families, was that she was looking at properties that had a single garage, and I said to her, I find that a lot of the single garage properties have smaller bedrooms, but I said if you look for the homes that have got the double garage, generally those floor plans are a little bit bigger. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
only a general rule, but it helps a
yeah.
bit.
And the other thing that I had as well was I had somebody the build is just about to be finished. And he said, oh, it's 5 bedroom. Will I get this amount? And he sent me the floor plan through, and there's no theatre room. So that is also something that a lot of families here in WA, we like that open plan lounge, kitchen, diner, and then a separate theatre for the adult children. So they can be in one space, you can be in another. So whilst he packed in 5 bedrooms, he didn't have that second living space. So I had to come back to him and say, actually, I don't think you're going to achieve any more because you've got a 5 bedroom property than a 4 bedroom with a theatre. Just because you've swapped that theatre out for a bedroom, that's really not going to impact the price, in my opinion, the rental
Yeah.
value. So it's again, when you're building these properties, just maybe calling a couple of local agents and saying, what are you finding is most popular before you lock down that sort of plan, will 5 bedrooms get you more rent if there's no theatre? Or, if I have 3 bathrooms, is that going to be more attractive? Phone the local agents and find out what their interest is and what the people are looking for.
And just like the example you gave before, where you had two properties where you're quite surprised at how one lease versus the other, understanding that or getting that feedback is important because, yeah, I feel like we might need to pay a bit more attention to the fact that adult children are living in homes longer. So that is going to be
Absolutely.
relevant for a lot of areas, particularly yours as well. Can we touch base on quality of applications coming through? In the south of Perth, are we finding that the quality of applications is okay or not that good?
Do you know what? There's a mixed bag, but we have a lot of FIFO workers that work here, so really good income. Maybe three men together or like that kind of situation. I have the one property I did get a lot that were not great, and the thing is, when I say poor quality, like I think what is most important that tenants know is that they need to put all of the information in. A poor quality application can mean maybe they've not got a great rental history, but a poor quality application can also be they've just not provided all the information. And when you are running around trying to get that from people, that is a little bit frustrating. But I've had some great applications. I've had some great applications coming in. Like I've got five now on a property. I'm going to submit all five because they're all great,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
that's good.
So I've been getting some good quality.
Yeah, oh, excellent. The can we go back? You were talking about how some investors, might be looking in regional Queensland or, Adelaide. And I do these investor webinars all around from state to state. And it's interesting because while back 3, 4 years ago, we might have been getting, a 6% yield for some of these properties. And now it's sort of come back to around, that low four mark. People can still buy quite affordable with that rental yield. And so when I was speaking to the team in, where were they? I mean, all of them, to be honest, the New South Wales, the Melbourne team, they're talking about their returns and saying that as long as it's got a four in front of it for the rental yield, then it's good. But investors are still having to pay around 750,000 for an investment property. So it made me sort of think a little bit like with WA, that even though, yes, we've had that growth, where we are now, I feel is still pretty good in comparison to other states. Like you could buy here for 650, 700 with a low four yield, which is what Melbourne is saying is fantastic for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, there is still a lot of potential here in WA. We're just the submarine, the nuclear plant that's happening in Kwinana. That's going to be bringing in a whole heap of people that are going to need accommodation here. The interest rates going down. There's all sorts of things that are happening. So investors shouldn't be nervous about looking in WA. There is still a lot of opportunity to be had. And it would be remiss of them not to still have a look. Like you
Despite the
say,
history of it or
yeah,
the growth.
yeah.
Yeah.
In that whole sort of strip along the beach, we've got all sorts. We've got the bigger blocks with the smaller houses that's got a lot of potential. And then going down sort of towards Golden Bay and Lakelands, we've got the newer builds. So no matter what your sort of preference is, there's still a lot of really good stock there that like you say, rental yield is still going to be great. The rents aren't dropping. The rents are, my renewals are some are increasing slightly, but most are holding the rents at the moment. But again, it shouldn't make you nervous. We had such rapid growth. It's just sort of like settling in to where the new normal is. But yeah, there's still a lot of potential here in WA.
Yeah, we'll talk about those renewals in a minute, but I just wanted to briefly mention the conference where we both went to a few weeks ago, and that Ben Hamer, who's a futurist, actually had talked about the
Mhm.
political side, which I don't really follow, of what's happening in the world, and how Kwinana, didn't he mention Kwinana was an
Yeah.
area to watch because it's close to
Yeah.
all the Navy bases and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. There's a massive industrial area there, and yeah, just so much potential. We've got obviously the
Mm,
Navy base at Garden Island. So yeah,
yeah, watch
my
that
ears
area.
tweaked at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into those lease renewals. So you were saying that you are seeing, a lot of them stay where they are, a few of them smaller increases. Is that sort of a
Yeah,
general?
absolutely. I've just done a whole load of renewals, and there were only a few increases. And the reason for that, Ash, is that, we leased them at 650 now because we've got 120 four-bedroom properties at the moment for people to choose from. What I'm saying to owners is your tenant is maintaining the property, your tenant is paying rent on time. If I wouldn't even want to push a $10 increase because they can go out and probably get one for 20 or 30, maybe even $40 less on the market today. So we don't want to rock that boat. That $10 a week increase that you're looking for, if the tenant did decide to move out and you've got your letting fee, and you've got your advertising, and you've got your PCR and all those costs that are associated with a change in tenant, if we worked out what that cost is, it's more cost effective not to have an increase and to keep that tenant for another 12 months. And then
Yeah.
we'll reassess it again at the end of the 12 months. But there were a couple of properties where I went in a little bit lower in order to get a tenant quickly. And looking at similar properties on the market, we could increase. So those ones we are having a slight increase. But mainly in my area, we're just holding rents at the moment.
We found as well, like that there were quite a few, we went through a bit of a stage where people were offering more to secure properties.
Mm.
And so what happens is we've been not really caught out, but we've been in situations where we've gone to do an increase with the renewal, and then the tenants have brought to our attention, well, actually, Ash, we already paid over and above, when we put the property in. And
Yeah.
so they actually, that from a tenant's point of view, there's no right or wrong. From a tenant's point of view, they felt like they probably shouldn't have had an increase because they've already given that owner that increase. Like I can understand where they're coming from with that. It's not something that's tracked on our software, so you sort of don't know that that was what happened when they first moved in or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
found that that's something that the tenants have expected, that if they have offered over and above, and we'll get into the technicality of that in a second, they sort of do hope that they get the respect of having that for another renewal at the
Yeah.
same rate. I don't know if that's come up with you or not.
Yeah, yeah, and I had someone the other day that 650 is the figure that is at standard 4x2 around in this area. It's 650. And they were on 650. And I sort of said to the owner, they are maintaining it well. I don't suggest an increase at this time. And when I sent the lease out, she phoned me out and she said, no increase. That's fantastic. I think tenants are just expecting it to all be doom and gloom every lease renewal. And I said, look, we're not just whilst we're working for the investor and we want the maximum rent for them, we're also trying to protect their interests by keeping those tenants in. Because the longer that tenant is in that property, the more beneficial financially it is for the owner. So, by not increasing the rent, by not forcing them to maybe go, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm going somewhere else, we are protecting them. So it was really nice that they phoned up and said, say thank you to the owner. We love living here, and that relationship builds, which is great.
100%. So we had our change of legislation last year with the rent increases only being every 12 months instead of every 6 months, which we all agree is fair and good and reasonable. So have you been, I guess, I guess I'm going to sort of let you know what I've been doing and get your thoughts on it as well. That sometimes if there is only like a small increase warranted, like $10, for example, I would sort of say to the owner, like, if you are only going to go a small increase, and sometimes it's not worth it, that you do have to then wait another whole 12 months before, doing that next increase. So there has been a couple of occasions where I have said, listen, I probably wouldn't bother doing an increase for such a small amount, but I would only do a 6-month lease so that we could then see whether the market has had any dramatic changes in 6 months, and then hopefully do a better increase in 6 months' time for 12 months. Has that come up? Like, what are your thoughts sort of on that situation?
It's a great idea. I mean, we charge for a lease renewal. So again, we've got to factor in whether there's two charges in that in the 12 months. But I don't see this when I'm driving around my area and I'm seeing the builds that are going on. I don't think that we're going to have another dramatic increase, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's
So I'm quite happy to do a 12-month and renew it after the 12 months.
yeah.
But yeah, I think your area that you work in, I mean, I know you do the whole of Perth, but speaking to my daughter who's also in property management up near the city, she is still doing rent increases on a lot of the properties that she manages. So if you didn't want to do one right now, it's a really good solution to assess it in 6 months' time to see if it does warrant that increase. So I like that idea.
And then that's also what you've just said is a great reminder that when we do these updates, while they're really, really important because it is so location specific, like you've just said,
Absolutely.
the media reports on the Perth as a whole, and you can't because what's happening in that Baldivis South where you are is
Yeah.
completely different to where your daughter is in the central location and north of the river. So
Yeah.
it's just that good reminder that it's not consistently the same.
Yeah. And
Although,
it's also a great reminder to make sure that the person that you pair with for your property management is not just somebody that sits and works that actually understands the market, that does a little bit of research, that knows what is going on, and can give you that guidance and advice. Because if you are an Eastern State investor, you probably don't know what's going on the ground in the areas. If you've got a property in East Vic Park and a property in Baldivis, like you say, there's two separate things happening in those two areas. So you need to make sure that you're being guided by a professional property manager that knows that area. So your solution of hanging fire, doing a 6-month lease and reassessing then because your areas are still changing and shifting, that's probably a really great idea and a good solution. I think down here, like I said, because we've still got and there's so many different stages of builds all over, and I still see blocks of land. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a whole housing estate shortly. So I don't see things changing in my area, and that is why I would say we're okay to do a 12-month lease with an increase at the end of that time.
yeah, no, it's good to know. The last question for you, are you seeing any investors selling now that they've sort of made their money? Like what sort of movement are you noticing with the existing investors? Because I mean, I'm not seeing any local investors really come through, but I am seeing some investors selling who have done really well. But
So I've not really noticed investors selling. Um, I kind of feel like this Baldivis, it was such a great sort of buzz around it, as were a couple of other areas. But they were only new to the market in the last 3 years. So that's a little bit soon for people to be dipping in and dipping out.
yeah,
I haven't noticed it, but on the chats that I'm on, some people are saying, I've made 150,000. Let me take that and go and look for the next hotspot. It's a bit of a riskier
mm,
sort of approach to investing. But if you're confident in doing it, then why not?
yeah.
I mean, I had a friend who purchased a property. It was only a little 3 by 2, the little cottage blocks with the garage at the back. And in 18 months, she made 180,000.
Wow.
And she did cash in because and she sold her principal place of residence because they wanted to buy a big house on the Rockingham foreshore.
Yeah.
And that was their goal, and that was their plan, and they did that. But I don't think if they hadn't have made that massive profit on that first investment, I don't think that they would have sold. I think they would have hung out and held out for at least another 5 or 6 years. But it depends what your investment goals are.
Do you think that there's some owners out there that maybe just aren't meant to be investors and it's just
Oh,
a bit
Ash,
stressful?
Ash, I don't think people understand just how stressful it is. I've got, and again, it's a trust thing. I've got a couple of clients at the moment because the app that I use is so transparent and everybody is on it. They can see when somebody's 1 day in arrears. And they're messaging me saying, my tenant is 1 day in arrears. And I'm like, I got you. I've got you. That's my job. I'm all over it. I can see it. I've already called them. But again, we're only sort of maybe 6 months in, so sometimes it takes a little bit more time to build that relationship and that trust. But some people, if you're sitting and looking at whether your tenant has paid rent every day, this might not be the route for you to do because it is very stressful. When I phone them and say tenant's got no hot water, and they're going, well, I just do this, I just do that, and owning an investment property is a very different kettle of fish. You
Yeah.
you have to kind of you have to take a step back and allow the person that you've chosen, and hopefully you choose wisely. The person that you've chosen is going to look after you and do the right thing. But yeah, there are a lot of investors that are super nervous.
And it's good for investors to hear this from from a property manager's point of view that we like that trust there, like, and while we, you've said we respect that sometimes you need time to trust someone, but you do have to let go of a little bit of the control and understand there's actually a lot of stuff that behind the scenes that is happening as well with us, that we're not going to tell you every single time that
No.
there is something that happens, but we are working on a lot of stuff. It's and like it is quite offensive when people don't trust you, when you're trying to organize something, you're saying, listen, this is the best option, you do need to do that. You do have to let a bit of that control off, because you will find it stressful. And
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest number one reason why I'm seeing owners selling at the moment, is because of the stress. And I mean, they're not having to even deal with a lot of the stress that property managers dealing with at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And a good property manager will deal with the majority of that stress for you. But you do have just to let it go and trust the process, and understand sometimes as well that or segregating the being frustrated at the situation or being frustrated, at somebody, for
Yeah.
example, as well, because that's another thing that we've got a few happening at the moment where it's pretty unfair for the owner and the tenant, and the situation's crappy, but the law's the law. We don't make the law. This
Yeah.
is what it says they can do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to let go.
Yeah. But also, like, and I've said this time and time again, when an owner occupier vacates a house, so like I've got an owner who's just purchased a house where it's been owner occupied, and I can guarantee you the first 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to have multiple calls from the tenant with maintenance. And that is a bit scary for a new PM, having to phone and say, no hot water, laundry tap dripping, sliding door not opening properly, just all of the maintenance that an owner occupier puts up with, that you now have to do because it is a tenanted property. So I actually work that into my conversation when I'm speaking with an investor that has purchased a property that has been owner occupied, and I prepare them. I say to them, for the next 8 weeks, we're going to have a lot of maintenance that comes through. Please, like, try not to freak out too much. This isn't going to be forever, but it will be an initial period while the tenant settles in, and while, they're finding these things that owner occupiers just put up with. Because no matter how thorough your inspection is, you're not going to notice that the sliding roller door is coming off its hinge. You just don't notice everything. So that is another thing that I'm experiencing a lot of.
I learned that from you, because I remember you telling me that once, and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't actually paid that much attention to it. And you were completely right. So yeah, your thoughts are that owner occupiers are more likely to put up with all the little tiny bits and pieces.
Yeah,
But if they were to buy an investment property, a decent investment property, generally
yeah.
maintenance has been upkept a lot more on those properties because tenants have reported it. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
I know, and I'll say it 100 times. I have worked it into my onboarding
I love that. Yeah.
process with investment landlords, because yeah, it's a massive shock, especially if it's your first investment. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm a landlord now. And then I'm like, oh, this has gone. The hinge on the kitchen cupboard is loose. That's so frustrating for landlords. They're like, well, why doesn't somebody take a screwdriver and screw it? And you're like, well, maybe they don't have a screwdriver. Maybe if you're a SoCo tenant, you do, because Ashley has lovely tenant packs.
With a screwdriver in it, but yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But we cannot expect it of them. It would be lovely if everybody did do that, but maybe we don't know how to tighten a screw. Maybe we don't know, and it can be, the bulb in the range hood, or just like, there are just so many little things. And so be prepared, because you will get that. And then after a while, everything will settle down and calm down, and things should run smoothly after that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it's really good information. Thank you for your time, Deb. So if anyone wants more information about particularly that Baldivis and that sort of southern area in Perth, Deb is a great option to speak. She knows the area very, very well, and yeah, not only an industry colleague but a good friend. So I appreciate your time and love everything that you do in your business. So
Thank you, Ashley.
if there is any questions, feel free to reach out to Deb or reach out to me. And what have we got next? The next webinar is Queensland. So yeah, if you're interested in any other states, just check out the YouTube and you'll be able to find them there. Deb, thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thanks. Same to you, Ash. Bye.